Hey, this is Brent Jensen. You're listening to No Sleep Till Sudbury, the show where we talk about the music that makes your skin vibrate. This show is brought to you by Pariah Pickups. What you want, what you need, what you love. Check them out at pariahpickups.com. The show is also brought to you by Storyfora, the writing services and content agency providing people with communication solutions of all sorts. For writing services of any type, go to Storyfora, that's P-H-O-R-A, storyfora.com. And lastly, don't forget to check out Thursday Night Record Club at the Brent Jensen Music YouTube channel. All right, today on No Sleep Till Sudbury, I'm joined by writer, musician, and fellow Sudbury boy, Mr. Sean Barrette. Sean's here today to talk about his new book entitled Heartstrings, First Guitars. It's a really interesting project that I've been fortunate enough to bear witness to right from its very inception, practically. Here's the man himself to tell you more about it. Sean Barrette, welcome to the show at long last, my friend.
At long last, for sure. I was starting to wonder, what is wrong with me specifically that Brent hasn't had me on the show yet. I think I've actually raised that question a few times, and you're always very good about changing the subject. So I was like, I don't know. I don't know what's happening here. But anyway, I'm glad to be here finally, because I've listened to the show extensively. The guests are always awesome. So I know that I've got a bar that I must rise to. So I'm going to try and give good podcast here today.
You will not have a problem achieving that goal, my friend. I guarantee.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
You and I have been friends for a while, and we've talked about bringing you on the show over the years as a guest, but now we have a definitive reason to do that. I mean, we did before, but now we really have something to talk about and get out there, right?
Yeah, well, you want to have some meat on the bone for sure. So I think the timing's perfect. I was being facetious before. I really appreciate being on the show, and this is kind of the perfect time for us to have this conversation. Definitely.
Yeah. So there's a new book on the horizon.
Yes, it's called Heartstrings, First Guitars, and it should be published, I'm going to say early August here. I've had a lot of realizations about publishing, writing a book, how complicated it is or can be, and how much work goes into it. So first of all, I want to say kudos to you on 3 awesome books.
Oh, thank you.
Because I had no idea. I really didn't. I went into this completely blind, and now I'm at this point where things really got real. We did the Kickstarter campaign and the book got written and stuff like that. So yeah, awesome. And now I'm faced with a whole bunch of things that are outside of my comfort zone. So, but we're going to get there. So it'll be available early August, and copies will be going out to the people who supported the Kickstarter campaign before that.
Love it. Now, this book features the stories of guitar players and their first guitars, which is a great concept. There are some notable names in this book.
Brent Jensen, for one.
Did my story make the cut?
It did. It did.
Wow, that's awesome.
Liam Ennis, another one.
Awesome.
The guy who planted the seed for the idea, who's also a good friend of yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
that's very cool.
But yeah, let's talk about the names that were notable for you. What are you looking forward to? What's going to light you up, do you think?
Well, how many stories are there, first of all?
There's about 280.
Okay.
So there's a lot. And what I asked people to do was, I interviewed a number of them.
Mm-hmm.
But some people just, because songwriters are writers, I think they just provided the story. And I said, okay, it has to be 180 to 300 words. So we're really looking at these short little, what I call vignettes, about specifically the first guitar that really lit them up.
Mm-hmm.
When people think first guitars, they might be thinking, some Sears job or a first act or, something that was $80 at Costco. But I realized very quickly that all of those stories were going to just pile up on each other, and they wouldn't be very interesting. It was when I was 10, my parents bought me a piece of crap from Sears, and I soldiered through, and my fingers hurt, and I still play.
The end.
So yeah, exactly. So I wasn't going to get a lot of content out of them. But when I realized if I talked about the first guitar that really lit them up, and they went, okay, this is for me now. I'm a guitar player because of this guitar. then I was going to get into some pretty special stuff, and I did. And I'd say about 2/3 of the stories are just from regular people, like me and you, and people who play guitar for the love of playing it, or who are, singer-songwriters with 3 CDs of no repute, or those who are still trying to make it, and those who maybe are on the downswing of their career. And then about 1/3 of them are these names that honestly I did not go into this looking for or thinking that I was going to talk to, and I did. And that's where the story gets really interesting.
Well, that's it. First of all, very evenly balanced landscape, which I like. And it's like the show. It's like No Sleep Till Sudbury, right? You don't have to be a celebrity for your story to be interesting. Everybody's got a compelling story. And, one of the things I like about doing the show is that I prove that. I have my neighbors on. I have, everybody on, in addition to Phil Collin from Def Leppard. And
right.
I like that. But
I like it too. And just while we're on the topic, you can go ahead and hook me up with Phil Collin for Volume 2. I'm just saying. But
he would actually do it.
You know what? That would be so amazing, because I was a big Def Leppard fan, man. Like a big well, we all were. People of our age, or I should say our era. We're all into that. But yes, that's exactly right. And what I found in this book and compiling those stories, and it's not just a compilation of stories. I want to be clear about that. There's like a narrative that I weave through the whole thing. But in compiling these stories, realized that some of the most compelling ones are just people who play guitar for the love of it, campfire strummers and stuff like that. But everybody's got their reason to pick up a guitar and then want to continue on with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The names that I had mentioned earlier, I'm kind of going, you would send me texts periodically and say, hey, I just got, Tom Wilson. Or, I just got Miles Goodwin from April 1. And I was, getting these texts going, holy crap, how are you doing this? Because it was almost like a landslide for a little while.
Yeah, well, Tom Wilson, I'm going to credit Tom and his manager, Alan Moy, with really cracking things wide open. So Tom and I go way back, and there's stories about Tom outside of his guitar story, because he and I have known each other since I was in radio. My first career was radio. I was 17 when I got into it, and moved to Sudbury, worked at the rock station. So obviously that put me in touch with Tom through his junk house years. And so we kind of know each other. I've been to his shows. He always remembers me when he sees me, which is kind of cool. And we can talk a little bit. And so I got in touch with him, because initially what I was doing was just a little book about probably like local players from Sudbury and the sort of the region, maybe up north to my hometown of Kapuskasing, and a few friends who have had more notable careers, let's say, like Ron Hawkins from Lowest to the Low. And I just wanted to pepper those in a little bit. And I was planning on this small book. And then I called Tom, and I'm like, Tom, will you be in my book? And he's like, oh yeah, man, just, call my manager, Alan Moy, get in touch with him. He'll set it up. We'll do it. I'm like, okay, cool. And it was when I got in touch with Alan, who also manages 5440, was like, well, do you want to talk to the rest of the guys in Black and the Rodeo Kings? And, do you want to talk to the guys from 5440? And I was like, yeah, I do. Very much. And that's when I started thinking, I don't necessarily have to limit this. And from my years in radio, working as a music director, I do know people still in the music industry. I do know a number of other artists who, may or may not remember me. Maybe I should just start reaching out to some of these people. And that was when the lid kind of blew right off it. Next thing I knew, I was, getting a story already written from Rob Baker. And then I was, interviewing the other guys from the hip. And that kind of went and went and went, and yeah, it just grew. And I have to thank a lot of people and friends from the industry, and also just the people who were open to it, because you run into some gatekeepers, but a lot of people are just happy to throw open the gates and go, yeah, absolutely, that sounds like a fun project. Yeah. Another thing I was getting back a lot was, oh, this is a great idea, like, this sounds like a fun project. So everybody kept saying that, and I eventually got to a point where I was like, okay, this is fun. Like, I really like chasing people and doing this and interviewing them and that. But I had to kind of pull up when I hit about 270. I think it's about 280. Yeah, 278 maybe, but who's counting? And now I'm, like I said, working on the volume 2 and reaching out to some people. And there's already some interesting cats who are pretty interested in providing their stories as well.
Well, I'll look forward to getting more text in that case then.
Yeah. Oh, you will. Well, I hope you will. Anyway, and I want to think it might be a little bit easier once people see the book. Once they've had a chance to read it, they, on the other hand, might go, "Wow, this book sucks. I'm not going to be in the next one." But I think it's a good book. I think it's interesting, and even if people don't, love reading about my narrative, which I think is kind of cool. They've still got the stories to fall back on, and my narrative just is kind of an introduction to each chapter and explains a little bit about why I'm doing this and who they're going to be reading about and in the next chapter and that kind of thing. Because like I've lived a life that has always had music involved in it. My dad was a musician, like I said, got into radio, spent 14 years doing that. Got out, learned how to play guitar, and that's where my first guitar story comes in. And then eventually, wrote and recorded a few records, and then started on this. So it's a pretty long go. It's like 35 plus years. Oh, more than that. I'm more than 35. But that's how long I've been doing what I do since I got into radio. But even before that, so let's say if we want to say like my whole life, basically, there's pictures of me lying on the floor in front of the stereo with those big giant vinyl headphones on that were like the size of your head on either side, that each had their own like volume control and pitch control and all that stuff. So yeah, it's always been a thing for me.
I'm glad that you elected to take that route, because I think what you will find is that people appreciate the personal conveyance of the story. Oftentimes when you read books, it was like, the retelling of history of this or the factual kind of telling of this. But when you add a personal element into that, and No Sleep Till Sudbury, I strove to do that, to make it personal so people can relate when there's relativity.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So there will be connectivity and people will really relate to this book, Sean.
I do know exactly what you mean, because I was going to bring that up myself. And that was what struck me about that book, was that, yeah, it's your personal story. Now, could you have just written a story and focused on, the 80s metal gods that you listen to and not personalize it? You absolutely could have. But what I loved was that here's a person that I can identify with. We both grew up in these little towns.
Mm-hmm.
I get where you were at that time. And that is what the magic was in No Sleep Till Sudbury. And you continued right through that. And I found all of the books really compelling for that reason. So yeah, when I finally decided, okay, how am I putting this together though? If I'm going to author something, I have to offer some words beyond an introduction, and then just a bunch of stories that aren't really connected for any reason. So they fall into different chapters. There's a family chapter, so you're going to find a lot of guitar players who are related, sort of the Barney and Dustin Mental and that kind of thing. And then obviously there are some family dynasties that nobody's ever heard of, and then there's other ones that are really well known, like the Good Brothers. I've got a couple of the brothers, Darcy, who is Brian's daughter, and I think that can continue too, because it's like I think I say in the book, it's kind of like hockey players in a way. If dad's a pro hockey player, there's a much better chance that the kids will kind of go down that road. And I think there's a certain influence that can be had when kids are seeing that, oh no, it is possible for me to make a living doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And so they go ahead and do it. So it's just an example of how those things worked out and what the breakdown is going to be. But it's definitely a book that anybody who has had those experiences or who loves music is really going to be able to relate to, I think, on every level. They don't have to be a guitar player, but they're going to find out what motivated their favorite artists to get into the game.
I can't wait to get a copy of that book into my hands.
Thank you.
It's going to be great, man. I know it.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to getting it out there. And like I said, I had so much fun doing the first one that I've already got plans for, volume 2 and a few others, because let's face it, the subject matter is virtually endless, right? The source material, it's out there. We all know lots of guitar players. And because I'm not looking for fame, it really kind of broadens the field.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know how many of the roughly 7 or 8 billion people on this earth are guitar players, but I want to talk to all of them. So I got to get started.
All right.
It's going to take a while.
As is the custom, we're going to talk about the songs that make your skin vibrate. But before we do that, I want to touch on something that you do that I think is really cool on social media.
Okay.
And I've been a fan of this for a while. So one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the show initially was to talk about this, because I think it's really It's awesome.
Okay.
Now, most Friday nights, the Barrette family has a pizza night. It's
Right.
not just some
Yeah.
standard pizza night, right? It's you actually yourself make these pretty incredible looking pies, and you include all the ingredients that you use, and they're not run of the mill garden variety things. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's cool. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of work goes into this, and there's pictures, and it always makes me hungry. But the other thing that you do along with this that I like even more is that you supply a playlist. Now,
Yeah.
these playlists that you have are just off the top of your head, but they feature all kinds of fantastic songs, and they're long, and there's deep cuts in them. There's songs that I love and that I've forgotten about, and I'm reminded, and I go, oh yeah, I see these songs, and I just think about the atmosphere. What the atmosphere is like when you're rolling these playlists and having these pizzas. Like, it's just a really cool thing.
Oh, thanks, man. Well, let me tell you how these come together. It's just something that I started doing. Yes, the playlists are long, and sometimes I think the people who are waiting for the pies wish they were a little bit shorter. But this is because cooking, I love cooking. It's another creative thing that I do, and it's like moving meditation for me. And I love putting together these pizzas and coming up with the ingredients. People are always like, hey, you know what, you should sell these. And I'm like, sure. Like, I don't know how much you're willing to pay, but, probably 50, 60, $70 a pie by the time I'm done, with the ingredients and the amount of time it takes for me to stand in the kitchen and have a good time and listen to the music and that kind of thing. But okay, so the music though, it all comes off this like Civil War era iPod. I got it when I started at the Sudbury Regional Hospital. It was 2004, and I walked around the corner. I'd only been there a few months, and the patient rep was emptying out the lost and found. They did it every 6 months, and whatever hadn't been claimed just kind of went in the garbage because they didn't know what to do with it. It had been in a hospital, so you can't like resell it, all this stuff. There's reasons why they had to throw it out.
Mm.
And sitting on the top, it was on the top, and it's not like medical waste or anything like that, was this iPod. And I'm like, why are you throwing that out? And she was like, well, like you can't reprogram them once you program them. And I said, I'm pretty sure you can. So do you mind? And she said, sure. So I get this iPod Touch. It's one of the ones with the little screen, it's like the original,
Yeah.
the OG iPod. And I'm still using that. And the day that it finally gives up the ghost is going to be such a sad day because my other job, being a music director at the radio station, I had like all these CDs, right, of stuff that often didn't make it to the air, but that I would listen to and think, this is fantastic music. So it would come home with me. And at one point, I ripped all the songs that I thought were worthwhile onto this iPod.
Oh.
And I made my own list. Now, I'm not an Apple guy. I don't know what happened. Something happened along the way. So I cannot connect to my Apple Music anymore and access these songs. So they are on this iPod, and that is where they live. And when that iPod dies, they are going to go away. At least the list is going to go away. I have the CDs in the basement, but so that's the story. And I just put it on shuffle.
Wow.
And it's kind of whatever comes up. I'll skip songs that aren't really down with the mood because I like lots of sad stuff too, but I'm trying to have an up tempo time. So, a song will come on. I'll be like, nope, not tonight. And I'll skip past it. But it just creates this really cool sort of automatically generated playlist with a little bit of help. And so a lot of the songs would be really unfamiliar, or they might be songs that never really got much radio play, if at all, but they may have heard somewhere else. So there's some deep cuts that kind of come flying into it.
Yeah.
And then there's artists like local people whose CDs I had that I put onto that one too. And some of my stuff will come up, which I don't actually skip because I like my songs, but mostly because I love the people who were playing on them. And it brings back memories of the studio and watching them actually create. So that's why that's interesting to me. It might seem a little narcissistic to have your own song on a playlist, but I'm going to give myself a pass on that one. But yeah, some really neat stuff comes up, and it's sort of guiding and influencing a little bit some of the people that I want to approach for the next book, because there are people who I'm pretty sure, like, those bands are defunct, but who I still want to get in touch with and say, listen, I know you're not still playing in band X, but I love this song or this set of songs that you wrote, and give me the story. And I think that might make things pretty interesting in volumes 2 through 15.
Certainly. Yeah.
Or so.
Now, if this were a video show, Sean, I would
Yeah.
show these 3 CDs that I'm holding in my hand right now. Signs,
Yes.
Puck Hogs,
Yep.
and Live Through This. You can hear them. They're right here. These
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
yours. And I just want to give like a very quick shout out. Like these are listeners. Check these out. Like they're actually quite good. You were good enough to give me copies of these a couple of years ago, and they're right here. I listened to them. So,
Oh, thanks, man.
yeah.
Yeah. You know what? That was, I don't want to say that was a then thing. I mean, I'm still writing music, although I haven't done much writing in the last few years. Like since the pandemic started, I don't know what happened. I sort of stopped doing it for a while. And then the book became sort of the creative outlet. But it has been making me feel like I really should get back to picking up the guitar and maybe writing a few songs. And I've got some other ideas, for how to take Heartstrings first guitars beyond sort of the can lit scene, the book, and maybe, do some other stuff with it. And like, wouldn't it be a gas to be able to interview somebody for a video show or something like that, and maybe even play along with them or something.
Right.
So, that kind of thing. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it, because the songwriting, being a singer-songwriter, is something I took really seriously for a lot of years, and I started late. Like, I didn't start playing guitar till I was 33, and I didn't record my first CD till I was 40. And I just wanted to get the stuff out there, and I did, and I think that's an accomplishment in and of itself. And there's some interesting stuff that happened along the way. Maybe we can talk about when you invite me back to the podcast. Yeah. I'm setting things up. I'm setting it up now. But
That's very cunning of you. Well done.
Well, thank you. Thanks.
That.
I mean, you can hardly say no now.
Well, how could I?
All right.
So
you were leading me to 5 songs.
I was, and I apologize that there's only 5.
Yes, thank you. I was waiting for that apology as well, because this was torturous a little bit,
Oh, it's a common problem.
Of course it. Like, how do you 5 songs, Brent? Like, I could hardly do it if you said 500.
Oh, I know.
There's like, we were talking about this iPod playlist. Like, there's about 1,300 songs on there. I could probably pick any of them and go, let's do this. But the ones that I picked were kind of just very instinctive. They sort of came right off the top of my head. And the interesting thing about this is that none of them would necessarily land as like, oh, these are my top 5 favorite artists or my top 5 favorite albums or anything like that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe tangentially, but they were just the songs that flew in. So let's start. I'll let you start.
Perfect. Okay, first one. Love this pick. It's the Waterboys, Fisherman's Blues. I think it's 1988 or so, right?
Yeah, thereabouts. Okay. I think this might be my favorite song of all time. Possibly.
Wow.
Yeah, possibly. And that often depends on the song I'm listening to at the time. But just this one, there is something about this song that affects me so viscerally, I could hardly not say that it's my favorite. A lot of songs will give you goosebumps. I know the whole premise here, right? Is that makes your skin vibrate. This song sounds like freedom to me. And it's not just because the lyrics about, I'll be loosened from these bonds that hold me fast, and the chains all hung around me will fall away at last. I mean, just an amazing lyricist, but the woohoos, the way that it just kind of bounces along, but not in like an up-tempo bubblegum kind of way. It's almost indescribable, the effect it has on me. It does come from probably one of my top 5 albums, because Fisherman's Blues was amazing. It heavily influenced my songwriting hero, Steve Earle.
Mm-hmm.
He was hanging out with the Waterboys back around then, and recording some stuff on his own while they were recording that. And you hear that influence creep into some of my songs as well. I mean, I will say shamelessly that the title track from Live Through This, my woohoo-hoos on that one were, sort of directly cribbed from this one. I also love, because it gets the sound for me, I love moving my capo up to like the 5th fret and recording, because you get that kind of almost a mandolin-y, jangly thing kind of going on. So it really influenced my early writing, and I just adore the song. That's one that I can listen to 10 times in a row, no matter how many times I've heard it, and still just be bouncing around the kitchen or howl it away in my car, that kind of thing.
I love these guys. Obviously, Hole of the Moon is great. They have another song that I love called A Girl Called Johnny, if you know that one.
Yeah.
Love it.
And their version of Sweet Thing blows Van Morrison's out of the water. And that is not an easy thing to do. I love Van Morrison's version, but theirs, they captured some magic there that is just okay. So I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that one too. That's an album. There aren't very many. There's only one skipper on that one for me, and that's saying something.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Carl Wallinger he's played keyboards in the Waterboys for a little while. He left
Yeah.
In the late 80s, I think, to form World Party.
Yeah, another great act, right? And I think he left
band.
after, maybe he left after recording "Whole of the Moon," because I don't know, I don't think he was still with them for Fisherman's Blues. He might have been,
No,
and that was like 1988. I think it's funny because you bring up "Whole of the Moon," and then we're talking about this record because I had a friend of mine, Steve Jones, who's also been on your show, talking about how "Whole of the Moon" is one of those forgotten songs, and it should have been a huge hit. And I often think, yeah, but if it had been, it would have sent them off on a completely different arc. Maybe Wallinger wouldn't have left. Maybe they'd have continued down that sort of poppier '80s produced kind of thing. And instead, in '88, they released this record that took them right back to their Celtic roots, and they had this giant band and just produced this astonishing piece of art that I just love.
That's a great point. I agree with that. I think you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent pick. So your next one now is equally excellent. It's I love this stuff, man. Otis Redding, Try a Little Tenderness.
Yeah. So up to Otis Redding, my exposure to soul music had been pretty exclusively centered around Motown, right? And obviously, being younger, a lot of the blue-eyed soul, like even stuff like Hall and Oates, like the things that I associated with soul music, which I loved, but it was also that popularized sort of version of it. And then don't even know where I came. I think I picked, it was Otis Blue maybe, or it might have been Otis Redding Live. My dad had a few Otis records, and I'd never paid any attention to them. I pulled them out and I put it on, and I was like, oh, okay. I think I'm starting to understand soul music a little better now because Otis just brought it, man. I won't say he's the best singer that ever was, although I think you could make an argument for it. But the passion and the realness of it all, it didn't just influence me from the standpoint of music, but it made me interested in the history of rock and roll and what these acts went through just to play the music that they had inside them. And obviously back in those days, it was still a country very divided along lines of race and that kind of thing. And one of the lines I think of all the time, it's on the Otis Redding Live album, where they finish off a song and you can tell they're just like totally amped up, and he's like, "We're gonna eat tonight. We're gonna eat tonight." and I thought, yeah, that you know what? I mean, I don't know. I'm not there. I don't know exactly what he means, but I kind of took it very literally, and I think there was a literal aspect to it where it was like, no, I mean, this is going great, and it means we're going to get paid. I don't know, but it just stuck with me, and I don't know, it made it. How shall I put this? Like I said, well, I think I said it already. It made it really real to me, and made me think about the history of music a little bit better. And the Commitments also did a fantastic version of that. I think that's where I had become familiar with the song "Try a Little Tenderness," that movie and soundtrack. No, it went the other way around. 'Cause like I said, I was in high school. I don't, at our vintage, Brent, sometimes the memories get a little jumbled.
Tell me about it.
Anyway, I just adore Otis Redding, and it's so real, and it was so different, and that's why I love it. And also, I think what happened was I'm a big fan of Toots and the Maytals. They're Toots is one of my top 5 favorites, although there's none on this list. But Toots covers Otis a couple of times on his records, and I think it's because there's there's a sameness. And it's not in the voice necessarily, although there's that, but it's in the realness of it, where Bob Marley was kind of like the apex of reggae for most people. But if you talk to people who really dig reggae and ska and stuff like that, they're going to bring up Toots. and also Desmond Decker and some of the other greats. Not that Bob's not great; he's one of my favorites too. But Bob would have been the first one to tell you that Desmond Decker is who everybody in that scene wanted to be, and that Toots and the Maytals were just as real as all get out. So
Yeah. No, there's just a smoothness and a richness to this stuff. I thought Sam Cooke when I saw this.
yeah, yeah.
And I like that you touched on Daryl Hall and John Oates, because I was listening to Abandoned Luncheonette last night. She's Gone.
Okay,
And
yeah.
what a record, right?
Oh, and I mean, and Daryl Hall's still doing it.
Hmm.
He's got that show that he does. I think I'm fascinated by it. Yeah, I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
And so, there's like, of course, there's been so much appropriation of black music throughout the history of pop and rock and stuff like that. But but I also think, like, I probably never would have found Otis Redding had it not been for people like Daryl Hall and John Oates, sort of, and whether they sanitized it or not, it still was like, no, this is really great music. And now I'm going to go back with an appreciation. I'm going to find these other artists, and then I can sort of bring them into my consciousness, and eventually bring them into other people's consciousness. Because as a kid, you find something you like, you're playing it for your friends, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I mean, I put that on. I was like, that I had to bring everybody over and put it on. Listen to this, and people dug it, man, because it was just so real. Like, even if you were more of a metalhead, you listen to that and go, no shit, no, that guy's metal as
Yeah. Yeah.
AF kind of thing.
Yeah. You can't refute that. I totally agree
No.
with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to change gears now a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Your next selection is Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, Lean on Your Peers.
Yeah, that would be another sort of maybe top five song, and Tom Wilson probably in my top five songwriters. I used to separate them into, like, well, these are my top five favorite acts, and then I've got my Canadian ones. And now, you know what, Tom Wilson, like, he is such an amazing writer, and put him together with Colin Linden and Stephen Fearing, and Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, they're just greater than the sum of their parts. If people have never seen them play live, they should go. They should listen to their stuff. It's really amazing. But Lean on Your Peers is a Tom Wilson pen song, and here's the thing about that tune. It's another one that gets me, like, right in the feels, and it's because, like you, I'm from a small paper town, very blue collar.
Mm-hmm.
I moved to Sudbury, blue collar mining town. Tom being from Hamilton, blue collar steel town. There's something about this song and the lyrics that just speaks to my experience. And it's not the experience of, like, growing up with your chums in high school so much. This one captures a moment in time for me that's a little bit different from that one, although that's there. But after college, I had to go back to Kapuskasing to work at AM 58, because it was a bad time for radio. There were some cuts that were happening, and there weren't a lot of jobs out there. And it was kind of a drag to be back in the hometown without my friends and the people from high school who had all moved on. And so I hung out with a different group of people, some of whom I shouldn't have been hanging out with, doing things that I shouldn't have been doing. But they became my peers, and they were influential on me in their own ways, good and bad, and provided a different set of memories, almost like a different lens on the town that I had grown up with and thought I knew so well. It was like looking at it through another person's eyes. And Lean on Your Peers just captured it, man. They played here years ago at the Steelworkers Hall, and that song came on, and I, like, literally, like, this is the kind of thing, everybody's sitting around at tables, and I just jumped up, and I was like the only person who, like, basically ran to the front of the stage, and I'm almost in tears. And my dad, who had come with me, still talks about it. He's like, man, you love that song, eh? And I was like, yeah, because, like, it just, like, it was like somebody had lassoed me and just dragged me right to the front, because I just have so much appreciation for it. Amazing tune. If people have never heard it, and especially if they're from one of those small blue collar towns, I challenge you not to be moved by it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Big change of gears here. This is the Thompson Twins and Hold Me Now.
If you were, again, of our vintage, the 80s were a special time for music.
Yeah.
Some people are like, well, the 80s sucked, or it was all too commercial. So here's the thing. The reason I put this song on here is, A, it's a great song. I don't care who you are. I Will Die on the Hill, that Hold Me Now, is one of the best pop songs that anybody's ever written. And yeah, there was a lot of weird fashion choices, and yeah, there was some weird production choices, and it was the video age. So people argue that there was more focus on how people looked than what they sounded like. But here's the thing: I took this song and I learned it on my acoustic guitar.
Oh,
This song, stripped down to acoustic, is an amazing, amazing song. And you can do that with a lot of these tunes. Take away all the fashion and take away all the production. And they're just awesome songs that you can mess around with stylistically and that kind of thing. You can play a whole show, by learning, say, 30 of the top hits from the 80s. And I bet you some people would be just bamboozled by how amazing the songs are. You could probably pass them off as your own if you wanted to do that, because people have never heard them that way. But stripped down like that, they're just phenomenal tunes. And this one, in really, when you do it, I'm trying to think of what the chords are. It's been a while since I played it. I think it's like G, C, A minor, and D or something like that. It's a really easy song, but that minor, if you slow it down a little bit, and with that minor, it kind of gets really wistful,
yeah.
and kind of like very tender. There's a lot of longing in it and that kind of thing. And it really lets you focus on the lyrics. And the lyrics are actually pretty good because they convey that emotion. So I would encourage anybody who plays guitar, just mess around with songs like that. You've heard them, you know them. And even if they sound really poppy, it's not that hard to figure out the chords. And you could be adding things to your repertoire that if you just pull them out of your butt, man, it'll blow their minds. It
Oh,
really will.
for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of songs like this. I agree. Seeing like a singer songwriter will do that,
Uh-huh.
and it's funny because you're a music geek like I am, so you can pick up on it quickly. But when you watch the rest of the crowd and that they're gonna have a whoa moment, and the chorus comes, and it's like hold me, they're like holy shit, that's like the Thompson Twins, but they didn't
That's right.
know until the chorus. So it is very cool. You're right.
Yeah, and if anybody ever, if you're an artist who wants to have a sing along or a clap along or something, you've never had that, pull a song like that out.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, I guess, what makes it special to me is there's a whole pantheon of tunes that when I first got into radio, obviously a very formative time, it was like falling in love because I loved radio, and I was only 17 years old. There was a lot of that stuff. It was a contemporary hit radio station that I started at. So those songs, they're in my DNA, man. They're just, my neural pathways are geared for them.
Oh, dude, I have an 80s playlist, and it just goes so well with summertime as well, right? So
Yeah, man.
it kicks off with Wang Chung, Live and Die in LA, to Captain of My
Yeah.
Heart by Double.
Yeah, there's so much stuff that, like, if you move beyond the stuff that hit the top 10 or went to number one, there's some great music. I was looking at a CFNY playlist from back in the 80s too, and like a lot of this stuff, you can make the argument that Platinum Blonde, outside of the 80s, would have been an alternative rock band because they started out as a Police cover band. So without, you take away like the tight red pants and the white, the white leather jackets and the what made them Platinum Blonde, those are wicked songs, man. The guitar playing's great, the drums are tight, the lyrics are good, like everything about it. Just if they'd been dressed up differently and styled up differently, it would have been a totally different vibe. And
We could go on about this forever. I mean, they take a
yep.
band like Alice in Chains. It's all
Mm-hmm.
about how they're marketed. Are they grunge? Are they metal? What do they look
Right.
like? What do they sound like? So, a couple tweaks, and you can turn a band like Platinum Blonde into an alternative band, like you said, because this.
Well, 100%. They did
those.
that with Alice in Chains. I mean, because Alice in Chains, when they came out with Man in the Box, it was like the end of the 90s, right? Or no, sorry, I'm aging myself again. It was the end of the 80s,
Yeah.
and early 90s, and the first video, like they actually had like product in their hair and shit. And then Dirt came out, it was like, we're grunge guys.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's all in the delivery and the marketing. It's true.
Yeah.
Okay, your last tune here is an interesting one. It is the artist is called Saint Bernard. The song is called Kate Bush.
Yeah. St. Bernard is my kid's band.
Yeah.
And I love them. And not just because it's my kid's band. His name is Evan Newell Barrette. He's 18 years old. It's his first band, and he writes some really fantastic songs. He writes in a way I can't figure out. I've never been able to write like he does, which is kind of interesting. And he always he gives me a bit of hell because I'm trying to keep this PG for you, by the way. But you know he and it has not been easy. He always kind of he's like, you know, I'm trying to write like the stuff that I like to listen to and more modern. And I'm always coming back to this alternative country stuff that I grew up on. And, but it makes for an interesting mix, I think. So like lyrically, his stuff, the way he puts things, it's really cool. I'm more of a storyteller, songwriter. I'm probably way more literal in the way that I put lyrics together than he is. And he's got this band of kids who are his age, and they're just pumping out some fantastic stuff. And this song, it's deadly, man. It's so hooky. It like and Kate Bush. They only mentioned Kate Bush the one time, and it has nothing really to do with Kate Bush because I guess that's what the kids do these days. I'm really literal with my song titles, but I played harmonica on it. So you know, Dad got to take Dad got to take a little turn with the kids' songs. I will say they were surprised, and I thought it was cute how surprised they were that I was any good. They're like, oh yeah, can you put some harmonica on? Sure. And I you know, so I just kind of toot the thing out, and they're looking at me, and I'm like, was that okay? And they're like, well, no, actually, it was good. I was like, actually, it was good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your incredulity that the old guy was any good. You know, because I haven't released 3 CDs or anything like that, or you know. But yeah, it was funny. Anyhow, I would highly encourage anybody to go and check this out because I love everything about the song. I really do. And I think everybody else will as well. And I had to give my kid a shout out, but I think the main take home here, I would love this song if it wasn't my son.
Well, I like it. I mean, you know what I get from it? I get a mid-90s kind of Canadian feel, like a treble charger.
You know, I'm laughing because there's so much of that on my iPod, and Evan grew up listening to it. And you are bang on because, like, you know, I was in rock radio here in Sudbury from like 1992 to 2002. So yeah, you nailed it. And there's so much of that Canadian content on my iPod. Yeah. So yeah, treble charger and like, you know, Rusty and Sandbox and the odds and stuff like that. So he also says he gravitates to that stuff, and that also irritates him because he's like, well, all my music ends up sounding like mid-90s Canadian stuff, Dad. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. And then he realized when he started putting the songs together that it wasn't necessarily a bad thing that he had brought in these disparate influences that do give you a unique sound, you know, because who else is putting that stuff together but some loopy iPod playlist, you know, like, you know, after it was rescued from a hospital.
Right.
Yeah, kind of got a story to tell there too. So anyway, I think, I mean, the music industry being what it is, it's hard to get noticed, but I hope anybody who hears this will at least go check the tune out, give it a shot.
Yeah, please do. Also, speaking of checking things out, Heartstrings First Guitars. Cannot wait to get that book, my friend.
Yeah, man. You know, I'm self-deprecating, you know, and I'm nervous about how it's going to be received because it's so far out of my comfort zone. But I think it's a really great book. I really hope people are going to like it. It's going to give them a lot of insight into some pretty fantastic artists. You know, I mean, I managed to get Gordon Lightfoot in there before Gordon passed away. You know, I've spoken with Bruce Coburn. I mentioned the guys from the Hip, but you know, there's like, you want to talk about sort of like deep cuts and stuff you don't expect. There's even like Leona Boyd is in there, Fred Penner, Pete Droge, and Pete Yorn, Hayes Carl. There's no rhyme or reason to it because I had no rhyme or reason going into it.
Well, listen, man, thanks for doing this with me. You finally made it onto the show. I'm so glad.
I probably talked a lot more than you expected me to, eh?
No, dude. It's all good. It's all good.
I got stories to tell, my brother.
Oh, I know. Well, that's why you're coming back.
Right on.
That's why.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Thank you so much. I love the opportunity, and I've been looking so forward to being on this podcast and having a chance to talk to you about music. You know, also because I dig your book so much. All my favorite people are broken. I loved the concept of it.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, this mutual friend of ours, Liam, who was, you know, your best friend and such a wonderful guy, you know, was instrumental in this book too. Maybe I'll tell that story next time.
Yeah, please
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
Definitely.
right on. All right.
Okay, stay on with me here. I'm just going to outro the show.
I will.
All right. This has been No Sleep Till Sudbury with Brent Jensen and my very special guest, Mr. Sean Barrette. Check the book out when it comes out. Until next time, folks, take good care.
Brent Jensen is the best-selling author of No Sleep Till Sudbury, Leftover People, and All My Favorite People Are Broken. All titles available in stores and on Amazon worldwide.